page 69.
The title of that study is called Defending the First Day of the First Month. I have to try and give a summary of or a background to this study. I mean, in the studies we've been having together, we've made reference to 2014 a number of times. And one of the things that happened in 2014 was the Lord providentially clarified an understanding of Ezra chapter 7, verse 9. So if we turn to Ezra 7, verse 9, we'll just read it together. Ezra 7, verse 9 reads as follows. It says, "For upon the first day of the first month began he to go up from Babylon. And on the first day of the first month came he to Jerusalem according to the good hand of his God upon him." So when you look at the waymarks that are identified, you have two starting points. In Ezra 7 verse 9, you have the first day of the first month, and then you also have the first day of the fifth month. And this all transpired in the year 457 BC. All this happened in 457 BC. And it's identified that on the first day of the first month, this is when Ezra departed from Jerusalem. From Babylon, sorry. But from Babylon. And it says on the first day of the fifth month, he arrived in Jerusalem. Now the third remark, as I understand it, is inferred. It's not directly mentioned in the verse, but it's inferred. Because based on Daniel chapter 9, if we just turn to Daniel 9, Daniel 9 gives us the starting point for the beginning of the 2300 days. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 and 25. Verse 24 says, "Many weeks are determined or cut off upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy." Verse 25, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks, and the street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times." Now, what Gabriel was explaining to Daniel was a prophecy that had been given in chapter 8, verse 14. In chapter 8, verse 14 says, "And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed." Now, the 2300-day prophecy is a prophecy that should be commonly understood in Adventism. And it is dated from 457 BC. And the pioneers of Adventism understood that 2300 full years would bring you to 1844, particularly October 22nd, 1844. We don't have much time to get into it. But here you'd have the temple cleansed. Sister White comments on this prophecy extensively. We'll just read a few quotations, but we won't be able to read all of them. But you'll find that the prophecy that Gabriel identified for Daniel, the 70 weeks. 70 weeks is equivalent to how many days? How many days in a week? How many days in a week? 7. So 70 weeks would be how many days? 490. But this is end-time Bible prophecy, and we employ the year-day principle. So this would be equivalent to 490 years, right? So there was going to be 490 years, that is especially for Daniel's people, the Jews. This was the period that was cut off for the Jews. And then within this period, Gabriel told Daniel of a 7-week or 49-year period, right, which would bring you to 4/8. Is that so? It shall be 7 weeks, which I'm saying is 49. So this is 7 weeks is 49 days, is it not? Yes? Yeah. So there'll be 7 weeks, and then it says 62 weeks. Right? And 62 weeks would be 400 and what? 483. That is? No, wouldn't it be 483 include being 69 weeks? I'm saying 62 weeks. Is it 483? Okay, let me just calculate quick. Doesn't someone have a calculator in their phone or something? It's 4? 434. 434 is 62 weeks. Am I losing you altogether? Are we together? And we're told that these 69 weeks would bring you to what? According to the verse. It says to Messiah the Prince. And who's the Messiah? Why was he called the Messiah? Because it means the anointed one. Messiah means anointed one. Right? And when was Christ anointed? At what event? At the baptism. Right? So you were 27 AD. And then when you continue with the text, so this is 1 week. Right? This is 1 week, which is 7 years. So 49 years plus 434 gives you 483 plus 7 gives you 490. And then it says, in the midst of this week, what would happen to you? You'll be cut off. And what does it mean that you'll be cut off? You'll be crucified. So basically, Gabriel breaks down the first 490 years of this 2300-year period. And then from here, you've got 1,810 years, which is a period one time for the Gentiles. This is not. From 34 AD was not the gospel going to the Gentiles. Was it going to the Gentiles or not? So to be named. So the Christians were his people. I'm not denying that. They were his people in a general sense. But when it comes to a special covenant people that he sets apart, as he did with ancient Israel, you don't have that until you get to it. Until you get to post-1844, because who then becomes the denominated people of God? Seventh-day Adventists. Right? So this is a period for the Gentiles. But that's not my point. My point is, the Millerites came to understand that the cleansing of the temple is a work of, what is it that defiles the temple, if I may ask that way? What is it that defiles the temple? Sin. how was the temple defiled by sin? Think of the sanctuary service. How is it possible that the temple would be defiled by sin? So it was through the daily ministration, the daily service, right? Sins were transferred from the sinner to the sacrifice, from the sacrifice into the sanctuary. Then on one day, at the end of the year, there was a removal of all those sins from the sanctuary, which is the cleansing of the sanctuary. Yes? So if you read in Great Controversy, Sister White explains that in the antitype of that daily, of the Day of Atonement, in order for sins to be removed from the sanctuary, what work has to go with it? In order for you to know that, okay, these sins are going to be taken, they were taken from the sinner, they're in the sanctuary, and now we have to remove the record forever. There has to be a work of investigation. So you've got the investigative judgment beginning on October 22nd, 1844, right? Now how they came to the exact date, just doing it in summary, is they came to the beginning history. Particularly, they looked at when it began in the time of Persia, but they came to this history of Christ, and they saw that in terms of the feasts that had been given to the Jews in the Hebrew economy, Christ fulfilled those feasts to the very day, right? When it comes to Passover, the Passover lamb that was killed was pointing forward to who? To Christ. And when was Christ killed? He was on the day of Passover. Was that not when he was killed? When did he rest in the grave? It's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. When did he resurrect? First fruits. And Paul calls it in 1 Corinthians 15, the first fruits of them that slept, right? So the argument of the Millerites was, if the spring feasts were fulfilled to the very letter in the experience of Christ and even to the very day, therefore when we come to the autumnal feasts which were not fulfilled in the days of Christ, they would also be fulfilled to the very what? To the very day, right? To the very day. And when is it that the Day of Atonement was fulfilled? It was fulfilled in the autumn of the northern hemisphere, the 10th day of the 7th month. So, as they identified the 10th day of the 7th month being the day when, when the Day of Atonement took place, then the argument was on the 10th day of the 7th month at the end of the 2300 years. This is when the 2300 days comes to an end. This is when the cleansing of the sanctuary began. And that's how they then did the calendation and came to October 22nd, 1844. So when they went back now to the history of Ezra, they saw that even though Ezra left Babylon and he had the third decree in his hand, it did not go into effect immediately, because in what season was the first day of the first month? It was in the spring, right? This was the spring. And it took him time, it took him 120 days to get to Jerusalem. And even when he got to Jerusalem, he did not immediately effect the things that were identified in the third decree. What did he have to do first? For those that are familiar with Ezra chapter 7. To restore the government, they had to restore national sovereignty and appoint judges. If you go to verse 25, this is still part of the decree of Ezra. Verse 25 of Ezra chapter 7. Verse 25 of Ezra 7 says, "And thou, Ezra, after the wisdom of thy God that is in thine hand, set magistrates and judges which may judge all the people that are beyond the river, all such as know the laws of thy God, and teach ye them that know them not. And whosoever will not do the law of thy God and the law of the king, let judgment be executed speedily upon him, whether it be unto death, or to banishment, or to confiscation of goods, or to imprisonment." So, when you look at Artaxerxes' decree gave the Jews a certain level of autonomy over their government, right? They could now govern themselves as a people, even though they were still under the rulership of the Medes and the Persians. Does that make sense? But with the previous two decrees, they did not have that element of restoration of their sovereignty, which is why we could not begin the 2300 days with the command given by Cyrus or the follow-up by Darius. but in its completest form it came to Artaxerxes. So the logic was, therefore, declaring the end from the beginning. I'm saying it in my own words. Since it did not go forth in the spring, and here this was the summer. This was the summer. When Ezra had to come in and do a work of appointing judges. So he still had a work to do in putting in place the government that would necessarily take some time. So by deduction, you'd find that or at least it began to go into effect somewhere in the autumn of 457. And based on our prophetic model, it would be the 10th day of the 7th month. I don't have a verse or a quotation that will tell you 10th day of the 7th month, but based on a line upon line type anti-type study, you could come to that conclusion, that deduction, that this is when the third decree goes into effect. Third decree effective. Third decree effective. So, since we understand that Christ illustrates the end from the beginning, if the 2300 days in 457, rather if the 2304 years came to an end on the 10th day of the 7th month in autumn, it means they would have to have begun on the 10th day of the 7th month in autumn in 457. Does that make sense? Are you following what I'm saying? Yeah. So based on the spring and autumn feasts, because they understood spring feasts are fulfilled at the beginning of the Christian church. And at one level, the Millerite history is the end of Christianity because this is the beginning of Adventism. The autumn feast, the feast at the end of the year, are the ones that were fulfilled in the time of the Millerites. Are you following what I'm saying? Are you really following? Because remember, you had in the spring, at the beginning of the Jewish year, Passover, unleavened bread, then first fruits. Then after that, you had Pentecost. But after Pentecost, you had the autumn, where you had the Feast of Trumpets, then the Day of Atonement, and then the Feast of Tabernacles, which ended the year. So they are saying the spring feasts were at the beginning of the Christian dispensation, which is the time of Christ, and they were fulfilled to the very day. So the autumn feast would be at the end of the world, and they would also be fulfilled to the very day, which would be in the autumn. And that's when the Day of Atonement took place, that's when the cleansing of the sanctuary took place. So if 2,304 years end in the autumn, they'd have to begin in the autumn, right? So, therefore, when you now look into the build-up to the autumn when this command went into effect, it means in Millerite history, you'd have to also have what? A build-up leading up to October 22nd. Are you following what I'm saying? That the 2300 days brings you to 1844. But there were 3 steps that led to the decree being put into effect in 457. So how many steps would you need at the end in 1844? 3 steps, right? And these 3 steps would be in the spring, in the summer, and then in the autumn. We already know the one for the autumn, which would be October 22nd, 1844, when the third decree goes into effect. Right? But this is not the third decree, this is the one. This is the third angel's message at the end. Right? The third angel's message. And if you read, I'll just read one quick quotation from Spiritual Gifts. Spiritual Gifts 153, paragraph 1. It speaks about a disappointment that the Millerites experienced, but it's a disappointment they experienced before October 22nd, 1844. It says, those whose hearts burned with a longing, intense desire to see Jesus were forbidden by their professed brethren to speak of his coming. Angels viewed the whole scene and sympathized with the remnant who loved the appearing of Jesus. Another mighty angel was commissioned to descend to the earth. Jesus placed in his hand a writing, and as he came to earth, he cried, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. What message is that? Second angel. Then I saw the disappointed one. So you see, this second angel arrives within the context of what? a disappointment, right? Because she then sees the disappointed ones again look cheerful and raise their eyes to heaven, looking with faith and hope for their Lord's appearing. But many seemed to remain in a stupid state as if asleep, yet I could see the trace of deep sorrow upon their countenances. The disappointed ones saw from the Bible that they were in the tarrying time, and that they must patiently wait the fulfillment of the vision. The same evidence which led them to look for their Lord in 1843 led them to expect him in 1844. So, initially when the Millerites were teaching the coming of Christ, they were teaching his coming in what year? 1843. They were saying sometime within the year 1843, right? That's why you have 1843 being emphasized here. And this chart is called the 1843 chart because they were preaching 1843. But they were saying it has to be 1843 based upon the Jewish system, the Jewish calendar, the Jewish feasts, right? So this was not the calendar that we use from January to December. They were using the Jewish calendation. Does that make sense? So they were saying sometime within the Jewish year 1843 Christ is going to come. And the Jewish year 1843 ended on the 19th of April 1844. We won't get into how you arrived at that, but if you were to do the calculations, the 19th of April 1844 marked the end of the Jewish year. So they waited all the way until they get to April 18, and then on April 19, the new Jewish year begins, right? And they were disappointed because, why were they disappointed? Because Christ didn't come, right? So they experienced a disappointment. But what did they realize at this time? They realized that they were in the tarrying time. It's the second angel. And what does the second angel call people to do? Babylon is fallen, so what do you have to do? You have to separate. And what is it that Ezra did on the first day of the first month in 457? He came out of Babylon, which is typifying the experience of the second angel's message. Do you see that? A separation from Babylon. But after April 19, after Ezra departed from Babylon, he then entered Jerusalem to do advanced works before this message went into effect. Right? Yes? He entered into Jerusalem. Now, is there anyone else you know in the Bible who entered into Jerusalem and it was a significant event?
Christ.
Who? Christ. When was it that he entered into Jerusalem in a significant way? The triumphal entry. Now, I'll read a quote from Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 4, page 250. Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 4, page 250. Paragraph 3. This is Sister White commenting on Millerite history. She says this: the midnight cry was not so much carried by argument, though the scripture proof was clear and conclusive. They went with it an impelling power that moved the soul. There was no doubt, no question. Upon the occasion of Christ's triumphal entry into Jerusalem, the people who were assembled from all parts of the land to keep the feast flocked to the Mount of Olives. And as they joined the throng that were escorting Jesus, they caught the inspiration of the hour and helped to swell the shout, "Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord." In like manner did unbelievers who flocked to the Adventist meetings, some from curiosity, some merely to ridicule, feel the convincing power attending the message, "Behold the bridegroom coming." So Sister White likens the triumphal entry to what? To the midnight cry message. And if you go into Millerite history, the day that corresponded with the first day of the fifth month was the 15th of August, 1844. And on the 15th of August, 1844, this is when Samuel Snow gave the what? The midnight cry message at the Exeter Care meeting, right? So you've got the second angel's arrival, the arrival of the tarrying time, being illustrated in Ezra 7:9, and the midnight cry, the seventh month movement, also being illustrated in Ezra 7:9, which brings you to the 10th day of the seventh month, when the third decree goes into effect, or the third angel's message goes into effect. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yes.
But Sister White tells us that Millerite history is fulfilled to the very letter at the end of the world, right? So if we read from Life Sketches 411.5, Life Sketches 411.5. This is what Sister White says. She says, now comes the word that I have declared that New York is to be swept away by a tidal wave. This I have never said. I have said as I looked at the great buildings going up there, story after story, what terrible scenes will take place when the Lord shall arise to shake terribly the earth. Then the words of Revelation 18, 1-3 will be fulfilled. Then skipping down, she says, but I have no light in particular in regard to what is coming on New York. Only I know that one day the great buildings, they will be thrown down by the turning and overturning of God's power. So she speaks of a time when the Lord would arise to shake terribly the earth, and she connects that with the downfall of great buildings in New York City. When did that take place? So 9/11, 2001 is when this took place. And she says what would be fulfilled at that time? Revelation 18. But Revelation 18 is a repetition of what? It's a repetition of all three messages, but in particular, it's a repetition of the second angel's message, is it not? So it means 9/11 prophetically would be what way back? In Ezra 7:9. It will be the first day of the first month. Then when is it that the third angel's message goes into effect in our history? It's at the Sunday law, is it not? Because the third angel's message here was identifying what? The image of the beast and the mark of the beast. And when is it that the mark of the beast becomes present truth? When does the mark of the beast become present truth? At the Sunday law. Because now everyone is being forced to accept Sunday. Right? Okay. There's another quote, but I can't remember the reference. Where Sister White basically says, my mind was carried to the future. It's Review and Herald, February 11, 1896. Yeah, you can write down the reference, I won't open it. Review and Herald, February 11, 1896. I forget the paragraph, but she says, my mind is carried to the future. This is future to 1896. When the cry shall be given, behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. What message is that? It's the midnight cry. The midnight cry had been fulfilled in 1844, but she's saying in 1896, many years later, that my mind is carried into what? Into the future. So she tells us that there's a repetition of what? At the end of the world. There's a repetition of the midnight cry. So you've got 9/11, you've got the midnight cry, and then you have the Sunday law. Are you following me? This is the structure that Ezra 7:9 opens up for us. But now, since we've been in a shaking from 2014 to date, there are some who are now questioning the correctness of what we just went through together here, and are identifying that the first day of the first month cannot be 9/11. They're saying it has to be some other waymark in the future. Whether it's 2014 or midnight, it doesn't matter. The purpose of my study is to try and show why it would be dangerous, it would be erroneous, it would be false, to move the first day of the first month from 9/11 to any waymark in the future. Are you following me? That's why it's called defending the first day of the first month. But before we move on, I now need to know how much time I have left. Because I thought I had to do this in order for this study to make sense. Maybe I've used up all my time.
44 minutes.
You gain for you. You have 44 minutes? Okay. Okay, so if you go now to page 69. One of the rules of William Miller, particularly rule number 4, says that to understand doctrine, you need to bring all the scriptures upon the subject which you wish to know together, and letting every word have its proper influence. If you can frame your theory without contradiction, then you cannot be in error. Do we know that rule? So it's basically saying, if you see a word, for example, if you see the word beast in the Bible, what do you have license to do to understand what a beast will teach you at the end of the world? You look everywhere where beast is mentioned and bring them together. If you can frame your theory without contradiction, letting every word have its proper influence, then you can't be in error. Right?
Yes.
Can you do the same with dates?
Yes.
It's not, it's in the Bible, you can do it. Because you've got this date, the first day of the first month, it's found in the Bible multiple times. So using rule 4, you can look at every place where first day of the first month is found and bring them together, and they will teach you truths about what? About April 19, 1844 and 9/11. Right? So we're not going to do that today because we don't have the time to do it. But we're just going to take a few of them. We're just going to take some of them. So if you go to Ezra 29, Ezekiel 29, so it's in your notes, or you can open it in your Bible, whatever you choose. Ezekiel 29:17 says, "And it came to pass in the 7th and 20th year, in the first month, in the first day of the month, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying." So if it's the first day of the first month, where does it apply? It applies here 9/11. Something interesting. Which year, excuse me, that I just noticed now. Which year, which waymark is the question I want to ask. Which waymark typified 9/11 in the history of Christ? The what? The baptism. Which was what? Which was what year? 2780. If you check Ezekiel 29:17, it says it came to pass in the 7th and 20th year, the 27th year. Do you see you've got AD 27 and this first day of the first month is in the 27th year. So that's an extra confirmation. But anyway, verse 18. "Son of man, Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon caused his army to serve a great service against Tyrus. Every head was made bald and every shoulder was peeled. Yet he had no wages, nor his army for Tyrus for the service that he had served against it. Therefore thus said the Lord God, Behold, I will give the land of Egypt unto Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon, and shall take a multitude and take a spoil and take a prey, and it shall be wages for his army. I have given him the land of Egypt for his labor, wherewith he served against it, because they wrought for me, saith the Lord. In that day will I cause the horn of the house of Israel to bud forth, and I will give thee the opening of the mouth in the midst of them, and they shall know that I am the Lord." So I'm saying this applies to April 19, but more perfectly, it applies to 9/11. In Ezekiel 29, what is identified there is the fall of a power, right? But you also have the rise of another power, is it not so? Which power is identified as falling in Ezekiel 29? Sorry? Egypt. And which one is identified as rising? Not Babylon. Maybe Babylon, but not Babylon. You didn't see it. The power that's identified as rising there. Babylon is receiving its wages, but there is a power there that's identified as rising. It's Israel. Did you notice that? If you go to verse 21, "In that day will I cause the horn of the house of Israel to bud forth." What's a horn in Bible prophecy? It's a power, it's a nation. Remember, you have this dreadful beast, and out of it comes out 10 horns, which represented 10 nations. Is Israel a nation? Is it a nation? Yes. So is Egypt a nation? So you can also conceptualize Egypt in that chapter as a what? As a horn. That is one horn that's being conquered, and another horn is rising. Do you see that? Are you following what I'm saying? Okay. If we go to Daniel verse 40, I don't know if this will make sense, but I want to try and make it make sense. If we go to Daniel verse 40, we just read the first verse. I mean the first part of the verse. In verse 40. Daniel verse 40 says, "And at the time of the end shall the king of the south do what? Push at him." Now if you get into the Hebrew of that word push, I'll just read Strong's quickly. Daniel 11 verse 40. The word push. The word push here means to push, to thrust, yeah, to butt with horns is the one I'm looking for. It actually means to butt with horns. So when he's saying the king of the south was going to push at the king of the north, you can understand that the king of the south, you can understand it as the king of the south was going to do what? Was going to attack the king of the north with what? Did you hear the definition that I said? What was the definition I said? But with what? With horns. So the king of the south, when he was going to push against the king of the north, you could understand it as him doing what? Against the king of the north. Are you understanding my question? So please answer my question then if you're understanding it. What did the king of the south then do to the king of the north? Bite him with horns, right? So it means the king of the south would have what? Horns, prophetically. If you go to 1 Kings chapter 22. 1 Kings 22, you've got another use of that word, push. That was used by a false prophet concerning what Ahab was going to do to the Syrians. 1 Kings 22 verse 11 says, And Zedekiah the son of Chenana made him horns of iron, and he said, Thus says the Lord, with these shalt thou push the Syrians until thou have consumed them. So what was he going to push the Syrians with, symbolically? With horns. So I'm saying the king of the south, that was the king of the south in 1798, at the time of the end, was identified as the power that had what? Horns in the plural. And biblically, the king of the south was the king that controlled which geographical location? Which geographical location? It was the south, yes, but which nation? Egypt. So if you go to Revelation 11, there's the story of spiritual Egypt, which is the king of the south, right? I'll read verse 8. Verse 8 says, And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. So this kingdom of the south, is it a singular kingdom, according to the prophecy of Revelation 11? Is it represented as a singular kingdom, a singular nation, a singular power?
Yes, singular power.
No. I'm saying, how does the Bible represent it? I'm not saying who is it in history. Does the Bible represent it as a singular nation or a singular power? It represents it what? As a dual kingdom. Does it not? Because it uses how many nations to illustrate it? 2 nations. And these nations can be understood to be symbolized by what? By horns. Is it not so? One is Sodom, the other is Egypt. Are you following? Because in Daniel 11:40 we're told that the king of the south pushes at the king of the north, and he pushes with what? With horns. And Revelation 11 tells us that he has how many horns? 2 horns, because he has 2 nations that represent him. And the 2 nations are Sodom and Egypt, right? And Sodom was especially known for attacking which institution that was put in place in Eden? Marriage. But Egypt attacked which institution that was put in Egypt? The Sabbath. Because Pharaoh said, you cause the people to rest from their labors, stop it, right? And that was the revolution that was found in which nation? In France, right? So if you take this a step further, history repeats itself, and all the dual kingdoms of history typify which kingdom? They typify the 2-horn kingdom at the end of the world. Are you following me? Because if you want to understand the 2-horn kingdom at the end of the world, according to Rule 4, what do you do? What do you do? Rule 4. Are we familiar with the rules? So what do? You want to understand what a 2-horn power at the end of the world is going to do. So what do you have license to do as a student of prophecy? Look at every 2-horn power in Bible history, even in history. And what will that do for you? It will give you the characteristics of the 2-horn power at the end of the world. So it means France can also represent what? Which nation? The USA. And does the USA have two horns?
Yes.
What are the two horns? Protestantism and Republicanism, right? So which is which? Let me ask you. Which one would you say is Protestantism between Sodom and Egypt, and which one would you say is Republicanism? Let's do a bit of thinking. Sodom is? Sodom is? Okay, my sister saying Republicanism. Tell me why you're saying Republicanism. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I just want to know the reason. Or I put you in a difficult spot. Okay, why are you saying Protestantism?
So when you look at the Protestant horn, they experienced a moral fall in April 19, so they are called Babylon. And we know of Babylon, we are going to call those people out of Babylon. And then the note says in Revelations 2:78 that people will be called out of the foreign churches as Lot and his daughters were called out of Sodom.
Did you hear what he said? If you read early writings 278, Sister White will liken the fallen churches to Sodom. And the call out of the fallen Protestant churches is similar to Lot's call out of Sodom. So this one would be the religious one. It would be the Protestant one. Does that make sense? So by deduction, what one would this be? Republican one. So this would be church or state. This is church. And this would be state. Right? Because when you look at republicanism is a symbol of the governing principle of the United States civil structure. Right? The principle of republicanism. Now, if you look at Egypt, in the book of Ezekiel 29, which we were reading, what is Egypt called? Ezekiel 29 verse 3. Let's go to Ezekiel 29 verse 3 very quickly. How much time do I have left? I don't even finish this studying. Sorry? 31 minutes. Okay, Ezekiel 29 verse 3 says, "Speak and say, thus saith the Lord, behold, I am against thee, Pharaoh king of Egypt, the great dragon." So at one level Egypt is the dragon. And I'll read from Testimonies Testimonies to Ministers, page 38. Testimonies to Ministers, page 38, paragraph 2. This is what Sister White says. She says, "Kings and rulers and governors have placed upon themselves the brand of Antichrist and are represented as the dragon." What are kings, rulers, and governors? Don't say they're the dragon. What are they? They're state power, right? So if Egypt is the dragon, Egypt is the state, right? It's government, is it not? And the Republican one is the government one, or the civil one of the United States. Does that make sense? Are you following what I'm saying? Okay. So when you come to the first day of the first month, as Ezekiel is saying in Ezekiel 29, he's saying on the first day of the first month there's a one that's conquered, right? But when you come to April 19, was there a horn of the United States that was conquered by Babylon? Yes. What would Babylon be? The papacy. Was there an element of the United States that was conquered by the papacy on April 19, 1844? Which element? The Protestants, right? The Protestant horn. Because we're told that they experienced the what? The moral fall. So you've got the Protestant horn falling. By the time you get to April 19, by the rejection of the first angel's message, they have completed their circuit back to Rome. Right? They have walked back to their mother. They uphold their mother's teachings, and they are, in theory, prepared to enforce Sunday observance by April 19. But can they do it then? Why can't they do it then? Because they don't have the support of the civil power to be able to do it. Right? In which history do they then gain the support of the civil power in order to do it? It's in our history. So when you come to the first day of the first month in our history, which repeats Millerite history, which element or aspect of the United States is conquered? The Republican one. And the Republican one is the one of The horn of Egypt. The horn of Egypt. Right? Sodom and Egypt. Are we together? Are we really together?
Yes.
So this is the horn of Egypt, right? And I'm saying the horn of Egypt that Ezekiel 29 is identifying is given to Nebuchadnezzar, given to the papacy when 9/11. Are you following me? Which is the first day of the first month. Now the question would arise, do we have historical evidence that this took place? And my answer is yes. If we turn to page 70. Page 70. Before we read page 70, what did Ezra leave with on the first day of the first month? He left with a decree, but it's a third decree, right? But it did not go into effect here. When did it go into effect? On the 10th day of the seventh month. Is there a decree that Bible Cross identifies is to test or go into effect at the end of the world? That's to test God's people. That's connected with the third angel's message. What's that decree? It's the Sunday law. When does it go into effect? At the way mark we go, the Sunday law, right? But based on this structure, when does it arrive? When is that third decree ready? At 9/11, right? In 9/11, the Sunday law was ready to be passed because the state horn and the Protestant horn were now what? Fallen, conquered, right? Right? So you've got the Sunday law prepared here, but it takes time for it to do what? To come into effect, to go into effect. So we've been tarrying all this time, tarrying for what? At a very simple level. Tarrying for the Sunday law, right? So reading from the middle paragraph of, okay, maybe not the middle paragraph. Right, no. Page 70, I'm going to start at the point which says the United States is going to speak as a dragon. In the first paragraph, it says the United States is going to speak as a dragon, and it is the state that speaks. Because what does it mean for a nation to speak?
It's legislative.
To pass laws, right? And put them into effect. And which aspect of a nation does that? It's the state. So the state that speaks. According to Ezekiel 29, the dragon is a symbol associated with Egypt. That being said, the waymark that would qualify to be the first day of the first month in our history must be one where we see the civil horn of the United States conquered by the kingdom of the north. And what is the kingdom of the north at the end of the world? Who's Babylon? It's the papacy. But what does the papacy have? She's a woman that has daughters. So you have to look for a waymark in our history where Catholics and Protestants do what? Gain control of the state, the civil government. Are you following what I'm saying? Yes. Okay. A waymark which, as typified by Ezra in chapter 7 of his book, almost saw an amendment to the United States Constitution secured and the Sunday law enforced. How it is typified by Ezra is that on the first day of the first month when he departed out of Babylon, he had the third decree, and the third decree typified the Sunday law. But just as it was not until later that the decree was effected, it is not until later that the Sunday law will be enforced. Thus, the tarrying time will commence on the first day of the first month, the tarrying for the enforcement of the third decree. For the USA to be prepared to pass the Sunday law would be clear evidence that its government would have been conquered by the mother and daughters of Babylon. Did you get that sentence? For the USA to be prepared to pass the Sunday law would be clear evidence that its government would have been conquered by the mother and daughters of Babylon. So if the Catholics and the Protestants control the government, it's evident that the Sunday law will be passed. Can we see a time when these characteristics are fulfilled? Yes, in 2001. Because in 2001, we not only see the passage of the Patriot Act, which significantly compromised the principles of the Constitution and made the US lean towards authoritarianism. You know what authoritarianism means? It means a dictatorship. You know what a dictatorship is? Like when you have a king that does everything. He passes the laws, he tells you what to do, you don't have any say. Right? Are you following me? Okay. But in 2001 is the year we see all three branches of the US government, executive, legislative, and judicial, under the control of the Christian right movement, whose political engine is the Republican Party. Right? Do you remember we talked about the Christian right? Do we remember?
Yes.
And we said who comprises the Christian right movement? Protestants and Catholics. And who's that? That's Babylon, is it not? So we've got Protestants and Catholics, and when they control the government, then you know that the government has been what? Has been conquered. It's been conquered, right? So George Bush Jr. was an avowed evangelical. He was one of these Christian right people, and was aided by them to win the presidency. Both houses of Congress had a Republican majority, which by 2001 had been taken over by the Christian right. And the Supreme Court had a conservative majority, and the Christian right are the conservatives. When you say conservative, it's these people that say, we don't want homosexuals in the country, you know, we don't want all this sin going on in the country. We want people to go back to God, and we want people to go to church. But they say, when should you go to church? Sunday. So they have a lot of good principles, but mingled with those principles are principles of force, like the Catholic Church. So you go to church, but go to church when? On Sunday. So these are the people that were controlling the US government, all three branches of the US government in 2001. So can we safely say that in 2001, the United States was ready to change its constitution and enforce Sunday observance? Yes. Right, we can safely say that. We can safely say Ezekiel 29 was fulfilled on September 11, 2001. Now, if we're going to change it, if we're going to take it from here and push it into the future, what does it mean? What are we saying? We're basically saying what happened in 2001 wasn't a fulfillment of prophecy. And if it wasn't a fulfillment of prophecy, those that are saying that it is a fulfillment of prophecy are deceived. Right? And who deceives? Satan deceives. Is this the work of God that we just put on the board? But if I'm saying that it's not, then I'm attributing the work of God to who? And what does the Bible call that? It's the unpardonable sin. It's a fearful thing. It's a fearful thing to try and move the characteristics of the first day of the first month sometime into the future, whether to 2014 or to midnight, or to the midnight cry, whatever you choose to do. But it's very fearful. So, another interesting thing that you should note is that Donald Trump, who is the current president of the United States, ran for president in the year 2000. And if he had won, he would have been president in which year? Like, when was he going to start his term? 2001. And we know, based on the prophetic light that has been opening up, that Donald Trump is the man that's going to do what? He's the one that's going to pass the Sunday law. So he was prepared to become president and fulfill his role in 2001. But why didn't he win? Is it because he couldn't have won? Why didn't he win? It was God's providence. Because it had to tarry. The Sunday law had to tarry. But now that he's here, what do you know? It's going to happen. Right? It shall not tarry, says Habakkuk chapter 2. Is it not so? So you've got so many events that connect you with 2001. That show you that it was a fulfillment of prophecy, and that it was the first day of the first month. Are we together? So there's many other things I mentioned there. You can always read in your own spare time. But I want us to go to the history of Christ before we bring this to a close, because that's my final point concerning the first day of the first month. The history of Christ, the section called the history of Christ. You'll find that the imprisonment of John can mark the full rejection of the first angel's message. Do you understand why? Who is John a symbol of? First angel's message. So when he was taken and put into prison and killed, can you mark that as a settled rejection of the first angel's message? When is it that the Protestants demonstrate a settled rejection of the first angel's message? April 19, 1844, they have rejected the first angel's message fully. They've put John into prison and they've killed him. Right? Does that make sense? But is Christ also on the scene? Is the second angel there?
Yes.
He is, and he's going forth doing his work. Right? He's doing his work. Now, what do you think this did to Christ's disciples and John's disciples when he was imprisoned and killed? What do you think he did to them? Disappointed them. Because what were they expecting? What was John expecting when he was preaching that the Messiah is coming? What did he expect the Messiah to come and do? To come and deliver them from the Romans. But did he do that? He didn't do that. What did he do when John died? Like, they're expecting immediate deliverance, but what happened to that deliverance? It what? It tarried. So they reached a what? A tarrying time. Do you see that? Because John is also expecting the Messiah is going to deliver, but deliverance tarries. It doesn't come. Does that make sense? Okay. Now I'll ask you a question because I think we're familiar with the story. So that we save time. Who is it that brought about the death of John the Baptist? It was Herod, Herodias, and Salome. So you have three individuals, right? And at the end of the world, when the second angel becomes present, it's identifying which power? Babylon. And we're told that Babylon is divided into three parts. And who are those three parts? It's Herod, Herodias, and Salome. Those are the three enemies of God's people at the end of the world. Does that make sense? So if they were all there at the death of John the Baptist, it means they're all there when? At 9/11. Ready to do their work. Does that make sense? Okay. Now who was in control of who? When John came to his death? Was it just Herodias? Who influenced Herod? It was Salome. Salome was at the forefront. So who controlled Herod? Was it Salome or Herodias? It was Salome and Herodias. Right? And who's Herodias? Is the Catholic Church, the mother, right? And who's Salome? The Protestants, the daughters. So who would Herodias and Salome be together at the end of the world in the United States? Is the Christian right movement. Because who makes up the Christian right? Protestants and Catholics, or Salome and Herodias. And what do? They take control of Herod, who is the Republican horn of the United States. Does that make sense? And they kill John the Baptist. Right? Was John the Baptist innocent or guilty? He was innocent, but how was he treated? As guilty. And my brother was talking about the Patriot Act, and what the Patriot Act was then used as a tool by the United States government to do what? To treat innocent people as what? As guilty. Because that's what happened with John. You had a lot of innocent people that were thrown into prison, sent to Guantanamo Bay. You know about Guantanamo Bay? That controversial prison under the control of the United States that people have been calling to be closed down, but even up to today it's not been closed down, it will never be closed down, because who is it for really? It's for us, right? So you've got all these characteristics. Do you see those characteristics? Do you see those characteristics in the history of Christ? Okay, so if we see those, then it means what I was saying about Ezekiel 29 is correct, because it is the second witness in the history of Christ that Babylon, the Catholics and the Protestants, conquer the what? The civil government of the United States, which is the horn of Egypt. Are we following? Okay, the horn of Egypt. Now, in bringing this to a close, because Ezekiel 29 says, to another horn. You begin to bud. What causes the horn to bud? It's the rain, right? The rain causes the horn to bud. So you've got the horn of Israel. Here at 9/11, the horn of Israel beginning to rise, and Israel represents what in this context? So it represents this movement, doesn't it? And it begins to bud because of the rain. And we teach that there is a rain that begins at 9/11. So you've got a rain on the first day of the first month that begins to cause this horn to bud. Are you following me? And if you read in Ezekiel 37, the arrival of the second prophecy, we're told that when the four winds are restrained, which is when 9/11, what comes to the bones? The breath. And what is the breath? It's the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is also likened to rain. So we'll bring our study to a close by considering James chapter 5. It's in page 72 of your notes if you want to read it from your notes. Page 72, James 5, verse 1 to 6. James chapter 5, verse 1 to 6 says, "Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the eye of the laborers who have reaped down your field, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth, or the Lord of hosts. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you." Now, when you look at Desire of Ages and you read about Herod, it says while John was in prison, what was Herod busy doing? When John eventually got to be killed, what was he doing? He was feasting. Can you call him a rich man? He was a rich man, right? So this message was for him, was it not? That ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and have been wanton and have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter, right? Because that's what he was doing. He was feasting in the build-up to the death of John the Baptist. Is it not so? Then it says, "Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he does not resist you." Who is this just who was killed? John the Baptist, right? So it means James 5 applies to which way, man? 9/11. And at 9/11, do we see a hit coming against the riches of the rich men? Yes, through who? Islam. Because, in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, the stock markets collapsed. There was a financial crisis that began in the United States that then spread across the world, right? And the world has never really fully recovered from that financial crisis since then. Yes? So you've got this financial collapse that's being identified there, and it's being connected with what happened to John the Baptist. You have these rich men, Herod and his people, and his wife and his illegitimate, it's not even really his daughter, but them coming together to kill the just, and he does not resist them, right? Are we following? So I'm saying that's a fulfillment of 9/11. So when you come to verse 7, notice verse 7, it says, "Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman what? Waited." Say that to me in another way.
Tarry.
Behold, the bridegroom tarried, right? While the bridegroom tarried, or behold, the husbandman waited. And this is when we are supposed to be patient. Is it not so? So you see that is 9/11. Because if you get into the study of Ezra 7:9, when Ezra departed from Babylon, he tarried in a harbor before proceeding to Jerusalem. Right? Was April 19 the tarrying time? First day of the first month was the tarrying time, so 9/11 is the beginning of the tarrying time. And the Lord is saying, be patient unto the coming of the Sunday Lord, the coming of the Lord, the day of the Lord. It says, behold, the husbandman waited for the precious fruit of the earth. What is the precious fruit of the earth? Think of Matthew 13. What's the precious fruit of the earth? It's the wheat. The precious fruit of the earth is the wheat, is it not? It's the wheat that is prepared in this history. Right? And who is that wheat that's prepared in this history? Who is the symbol of that wheat? It's not just the priest. It's saying from year to year. The symbol of them is the 144,000, right? So the Lord is waiting for the development of the 144,000, for them to come to maturity, until we receive the what? So when does the early rain begin? Someone was asking me that question. Here. The early rain, and when does the latter rain begin for the priests? 2014. When would it begin for Adventism? Okay, never mind. Let me not go there. It would be too difficult. But you see the early rain beginning at 9/11. At one level, you can see the latter rain at the midnight crack. But I know there's intricacies. I don't want to deal with the intricacies. Does it make sense? Yes. Then verse 8 says, "Be also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh." Now the reason why we went through all this was just to show that according to Ezekiel 29, when the horn of Egypt, which is the Republican horn of the United States, the state horn, is conquered by Babylon. And I'm saying Babylon is both the mother and the daughters. That happened in 2001, right? And the history that illustrates it very clearly is the history of Christ. When John was killed, which I'm saying is the rejection of the first angel's message, an illustration that Babylon had fallen. And Babylon in that story was consisting of what? 3 parts. And what caused Herod to kill John? Why did he kill him? Was it because he hated him?
No.
Because what? Because what had they caused him to do? To drink of the wine. So Babylon is fallen because she caused all nations to do what? To drink of the wine of the wrath of the fornication. So you see the wine drinking there as well. Right? So I'm saying this is the fall of Babylon. And you've got historical evidence that the Catholics and the Protestants controlled the government of the United States. They were the ones in control of the Supreme Court, they were the ones in control of Congress, and they were the ones that controlled the presidency, because George Bush was a Christian right individual. Does that make sense? So if they wanted to, I'm sure they wanted to, if the Lord had not stopped them, what would they have done with the control they had over government? They would have changed the constitution and very speedily inserted provision for Sunday legislation. Very quickly. But it didn't happen because the husbandman waited for what? For the precious fruit of the earth. And Ezekiel 29 represents it as the horn of Israel doing what? Budding. And what causes it to bud? The rain. And James 5 also talks about what? The rain. Is it not so? The early and the latter rain. So there are many other illustrations of the first day of the first month that we can look at, but I think this is a very profound and comprehensive one, just to show us that if you hear people now trying to change the location of the first day of the first month, what does that do? It takes the rain from 9/11, pushes it into the future, right? It takes the collapse of the economy that's represented in James 5 and throws it into what? The future. And then it takes the budding of the horn of Israel, which is the development of this church triumphant, and throws it where? Into the future. It basically takes all these characteristics, the second angel, and throws it into what? Into the future. And once we do that, we're rejecting the spirit of prophecy. And we're rejecting the spirit of prophecy because Sister White says, when would this angel arrive? When what would happen? When the great buildings of New York City would come down. And has there ever been greater buildings than the buildings of the World Trade Center today? No. So it would be willful blindness for us to say, those buildings that fell at 9/11 are not the ones. We're waiting for some future buildings. That's willful blindness, and you believe that to your own peril. How much time do I have left? 4 minutes. It's okay. I think we'll bring this to a close here, but I hope we're able to see that you cannot justify the removal of the first day of the first month from 9/11 to the future. Do we see that? So, any other study you then do of the first day of the first month, whether it's the rearing up of the temple or the cleansing of the temple, it has to be 9/11, because that's the structure that God has given us. And what God has spoken, does it change? No. So let's pray. Our Father in heaven, Lord, we thank you for bringing us up to this time, and allowing us to consider a certain aspect of your word, Lord, which has come under question in recent times. which is the subject of the first day of the first month. I pray, Lord, that you might help us as individuals to understand this truth, to understand the rules that bring us to this truth, and to be grounded and settled in this truth and hold fast, Lord, the beginning of our confidence. Because we can hear many voices that are trying to take away these things from us. I pray that you might give us much grace, Lord, the gold tried in the fire that we might be rich, and the white raiment that we may be clothed, and the eye salve that we may see. Please assist us, Lord, lest we perish in these solemn hours. In Jesus' name we do pray and for your sake.